Hello, and welcome to this podcast. And I am joined now by my good friend, Adedamola Adeleke, who is now an exhibitor. And how's your world, mate?
Thanks, Adam. I feel like I'm out there hawking my goods. But yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to chatting a bit more about data-driven exhibiting.
That is why I mentioned it, because when we met, we were both working in a trade show business and so on. So you've come from that side of the fence. You're now on what that world would consider buy side. And when we were talking about prepping for this episode, we loosely called it the data-driven exhibitor because
Mm.
more and more people that I talk to are seeing their customers, bearing in mind a lot of people I talk to are event owners, asking for more data points, more justification from a data-driven way to take part in events. Budgets are becoming tight again, so there's more scrutiny on all the channels. And I'm in danger of doing all the talking, which is rubbish in a podcast. So can you just talk about that? Can you just bring your world to life as someone who is a data-driven exhibitor? What do you need to see?
See, that's a really good question, actually. No one's actually asked me that.
That's interesting in itself. Sorry, I interrupted. You carry on.
No, it's fine. I'm being honest, right? Like, that's interesting. When I was sell side, if you will, or when I was not in house, selling B2B marketing programs into marketing teams in different industries. The pitch is often the same, right? You're selling the sizzle or
what you think is the sizzle.
Exactly, or what you think is the sizzle, right? So all the new flavors and all the new scents, and then crossing the divide into in-house and finding like it's still the same, right? Like it's in some cases you even get the people who straight up tell you we collect these many things that people have filled out about what it is they care about and not. Rarely ever does anyone actually, I can't remember last time anyone actually asked me, what is it we'd like to see? And obviously you asked me what I'd like to see. And I personally don't think it's anything revolutionary. I believe all marketing is based on three things: who you're talking to, what are you telling them, how are you telling them that? And that needs to match to how they want to be told that thing, what they want to hear, and that they are the sort of person that you should be talking to in the first place. Simple principle. And you can take that, in my opinion, everywhere from PR, online, digital, through to in person on the show floor, which is, I find particularly interesting because of the show floor. Like there's so many places that you interact with so many people over so many things. Ergo, to an example, you're in the supply chain sector, you're looking at a smart supply chains, and that's the broad bucket. But there are quite a lot of subtopics within this. Someone's interested in ITOT integration. Someone's interested in communication. Somebody's interested in ERP integration. Somebody's interested in customer management. Lots of subtopics. Then there's formats. There's who's watched it on the show floor theater, who's watching it in the main stage, who's taking place on a sidebar round table, who's watching one of the video screens or stuff like that. Where are they spending the most time at the show, on the show floor? And what's interesting is with the examples that I've mentioned there of various ways that people interact with certain messages on the show floor, how much of that info is actually presented to me as an exhibitor or buyer, potential buyer? You might get here's the list of people who they scanned into a room. If you're lucky, you might even get, okay, how long they were there for. You rarely get that. Most cases, you just get like a blind list of people who go to the event, let alone like where they spent time, what they engaged with the most, that sort of thing. So I'm just painting that picture there of when you balance who, what message, what channel, do we translate that back into the exhibition floor?
You raise a really interesting point. and I'm going to try and not go off on one because it's my hobby horse, and make sure you do more of the talking on this episode than I do. But I think you've hit the nail on the head. The information that is provided in that medium is still very structured. Here's Adam. He's a CTO. I happen to be using that job title at the moment. I'm going to use CEO tomorrow and then
It
founder
suits you.
another day. Whatever suits me, whatever's going around. But my point is, you then get this structured data,
Mm.
and then you at your side are still trying to triage that list based on your structured norms. We sell to CTOs, therefore it must be that message. But when we take that up to the digital world, yes, the form that's been filled out is by a CTO, but because it's come through a digital workflow, they spent 5 minutes on this blog post that you guys put out as part of your content marketing, 8 minutes there, 8 minutes there. So you've got a lot more behavioral data to triage that. But if I hear what you're saying, you're not getting that from what is a very expensive marketing vehicle, right?
Yeah. That's so right. Outside the event or back in our universe, we've got our version of lead scoring that helps us approximate intent. Because in my opinion, again, the only real intent is if someone says, I want to talk to you or wants more information. Everything else is just some sort of deduction. And you do that through a lead score, which to your point takes into account lots of various things people have done, blah, blah, blah. But that's listening to you speak there. That's actually an even better way of describing it. So today, what I get is a list of people, and I might get some information they filled in before they got to the show floor. I'm interested in this. This is my buying spend. I have this authority. Yeah, fine, sure, cool. But then on the show floor, in terms of what they actually go on to do, why can't I get some sort of lead score based off that? So this person has engaged with this message across these channels on the show floor, sub-channels on the show floor. Therefore, rank them on the priority. Now that's different, right? Because you're now not just 10 points going on to my lead score thing, 100. It's a more qualified thing. Everything's expensive from 5,000 through to a couple of $100,000. Out of that, how many people have actually come to you asking for information, the proportion of other people at the show floor that you could potentially be getting more value out of, that you don't get value out of because you don't really know what it is they care about and how they want to consume it. You might know who they are or what it was they filled in the form.
Yeah, look, and that's what I'm talking about, right? Structured data has a value. Of course it does.
Yeah.
And there's a huge value in those exhibition forms, and for a really simple reason, because you're going to have a big old badge and you're going to be walking around, so you tend to get your job title right, your company name right. Yeah, so it's higher quality, maybe you could argue, but it doesn't translate to real buyer value. In the digital space, because maybe it's easier to measure, we're building in all of these algorithms that give you intent scores. And yes, you're right. You can argue, actually, you now need, probably to get something really valuable, you need 3 external intent scores, a bit like what Dan's doing, then your own score, whatever. And that gets you close to truth. But there's value in that score. Because if I am a chief marketing officer, I'm not always looking for a CRM system. I might be looking for a data analytics system. The intent of what I am trying to get is so important. And what I can't understand is with something like a live event, why A, you as exhibitors aren't demanding it, and B, why is the industry not giving it to you? So if the industry were to give it to you, would you know what to do with it?
Cool. That's a really good question, Paul. That's a really good one. I don't know that people aren't asking for it. And I can't say that I've asked for it as clearly as we're talking about it now. But I do know that people would know what to do with it because we're already using lead scoring is not new. Everyone's got some type. Any marketer that's worth their salt has got some type of lead scoring for leads in general, or at least for leads that are not inquiries, right? So anywhere you're trying to make deductions, let's put it that way. And for us, okay, operating in a B2B SaaS company, selling into enterprise, you're selling to multiple personas, you've got to have that, right? Because you need to look at that across the personas within the account. The thing that the bit about why the industry isn't providing that is something I scratch my head about, because we're still doing the same old stuff. Like, here's a sample list of the attendee list. Here's who's speaking. It makes a difference to me, right? Okay, yeah, yes, it does. It's good to see that there's good quality speakers, but in reality, like, they're not going to be people I talk to often. Like the person with the smallest booth is not getting in touch with the speakers. That takes that out of the thing. So then you look at the list, they look like the personas of people where they're. I think events are good at giving that basic info. What I'm trying to get to is that all that info is just one of the three things. It's just who they are to an extent. What about what they actually care about and how they like to consume it? And the point I wanted to get to is, I know you talked about digitizing events a lot. And did you actually write that book you thought about writing? I'll leave that one there. It's not a dig, but
I'm writing it in a series of blog posts on digitizing events, trying to pull the narrative together. Because as sometimes I know I've got an idea,
yeah,
but joining it all up, that's the hard part, and it's all around value. I think I'm going to let you carry on talking.
Yeah. No, that's fine. It wasn't a stealth plug it wasn't a stealth plug for your blog or a dig as to why you still haven't written that book that you promised. But the basic principle of what you're talking about, you look at, and you're right, you look at what we're doing with digital marketing, capturing all the signals, filtering that all together, orchestrating, aggregating, orchestrating, and then synthesizing that into some sort of insight. But then you look at what we're doing in person, and that really hasn't changed. Because I remember 10 years ago, people talking about beacons and GFC, NFC tags, and being able to do heat maps. And we're still presenting heat maps like it's a new thing. So I think that's more the problem. Like, why we're still doing lead scanning and apps, and it's basically just an app with that the leads have been scanned into. Like, why aren't we connecting the feeds? Because that's the real point. Because you create digital entities of the person, of the people, the sub channels, or the various points on the show floor or whatever, and the various stuff within those things. And there you go. Now you've got a journey, digital twin journey that you can understand, right? Like in a different way. Okay, I'm a analytics vendor. I go to analytics world. All the job titles say analytics. Great. But then you can tell me that actually this is where most people spend time. The people who spend time in this area, this is the sort of things that resonate the most with them. It may sound obvious, right? Okay, in the breakout studio on transformation, yes, we're all going to talk about transformation, but what sort of formats work best? What got the most listened to time? What got like the most engagement and questions? All that metadata in the context of what do you call it, an exhibitor visitor, a conference visitor, straight into conference there, or again, parts of the most heat map. What's the average time for people in a certain part of the show floor? All that kind of info. And then that takes the sale from, I would imagine, well, in my opinion, you, suddenly you stand miles apart from the person who's saying to me, look at our show floor and we're going to have, I don't know, fire eaters at some point, like in the show, versus you who's telling me, here's data, you can use this data to make a decision as to how you would show up here. That suits you, who you're trying to engage, what they want to hear and how they want to hear it. Because that will be different for, you're right, like at the beginning, you talked about different vendors and what it is they're selling. The person who wants to consume information about widgets and legal information, for example, versus the person who wants to consume information around dashboards and whatnot. I don't know. Do the math.
Yeah, I get it, and I think it's also something that I've sat with for a long time. I've had this love-hate relationship with live events. I've been doing them for years, and then started doing them online, which was just a complete eye-opener, right? Where you have to be in attention by design. If your content isn't good, you aren't looking at someone in the eye, so you then get up off your seat. You just switch off. And one of the things I find taking stuff from that world is that if we can profile, going back to your heat map example, the amount of vendors used to come in when I was running media businesses, say, hey, we've got some tech to do a heat map. Look, you can see your heat map. I'm like, to be honest, I don't need your bloody heat map to know where the show is busy, where it isn't busy, because I am there. None of you guys are articulating how I can derive value out of that heat map. And then you get the stupid assertions like, hey, look, if you get a heat map, you can sell people around that heat map. All right, but you fundamentally changed the environment. So your heat map is already going to be different. So what's the point? Stupid, right?
Sorry, that's a really good point. It's not about the heat map.
It's not about the heat map.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually.
Yeah.
And by the way, I wanted to put that out there. I love in-person events. I think everything has its place. I think the things that events do really well, probably doing a bit better now in terms of creating experiences. But you're right. I do find it odd that the insight, intelligence, analytics, data-driven side of events hasn't really changed much, in my opinion. Okay, yes, everyone's now got an app. People can like stuff on the app. By the way, I think I'm not a big fan of that. I think like nobody needs another app on their phone, but then I'm old-fashioned. But good luck with that.
I think you're old-fashioned. If you look at some of the stats coming out of Gen Z or whatever, you're right. Creating an app is so easy. Everybody's offering your app. My hairdresser's got an app. Why on earth would I want that? I've got no idea.
We've all been there with the after receiving 25,000 emails about said app, that is going to be the way we do everything. No, it's not the only way you can do everything, because you can get it in paper when you get there, and it'll be the tumbleweeds on there when you get there.
Yeah.
So like you said, but why I'm bringing this up is not to bash apps. It's more exactly what you said about heat maps.
Go on, bash.
No, I wouldn't do that. It's exactly what you said about heat maps.
Do I have to edit this bit out? Do I have to edit this bit out?
That's up to you. What I am trying to say, though, is that when you think about your example about heat maps and not being about the heat map, that's the thing. It's not about the app. What are you hoping to give people insights about from the app? How many people liked something? That doesn't matter if people aren't going to be on the app. So there's perhaps, and I don't know if I'm moving the conversation along a bit, but when you're thinking about, what you did say, okay, why aren't we asking, or why isn't the industry providing those things? Perhaps there's the one, how do you create a digital twin of an in-person event, which I think, is it just a technical difficulty thing, or is there probably also some political, like the politics of digitizing an event where people are heavily vested in making it as physical as possible? Take from that what you want. That's probably akin to the ITOT conversation people were having 11 years ago about the internet, industrial internet of things, and digitizing physical assets. The other thing is, assuming you can digitize this, is really understanding, translating a user journey in an in-person event in perhaps akin to the way you would do a digital user journey. Okay, they visited the website, they get this asset, they downloaded this, they did the cookies. We're saying this on the podcast is easy, and that's the way I would look at the event. But maybe again, is there maybe technology, understanding, whatever, and then finally on the bit of, not that I took umbrage with it, would I know what to do with it? I honestly believe that people would, know what to do with it, because again, we know what to do with the other, like the digital, what comes from digital marketing, and also If you build it, they will come. In marketing, if you show people what to do with it, they will do. Like, why are you giving me a list of things that people said that they wanted to buy? Like, the assumption here is I wouldn't know what to do with that. So that last bit, I feel like is not really. I think it'll be, let's flip this around and say, okay, imagine there were digital twins and you could give me all that insights. I'm prepared to bet tenor that people would do stuff with it.
Risk of taking over my own podcast, you're preaching to the converted, and it's where I landed, which is why I'm calling what I'm doing digitizing events. I'm not calling it virtual events because that's a whole different format. It's a whole different form and function. I'm not calling it event tech, but the reason why I call it digitizing events is for exactly what you've described, right? How do we better articulate the value of an individual's experience at the event to the buyer and also to them? We can all be our own samples. I go to an event to get information. I want to get as much information I can in a very concentrated time period to deepen my knowledge so I can take some action. That's why. And I feel a lot of the tech out there, because it's what I call the logistics paradox, right? Because so much of the event is wrapped up in logistics, so much of your effort, so much of your cost, so much of your spend, that a lot of the apps and the tech are geared around solving logistic problems rather than picking out and joining out these signals, which I've loosely called the IAC framework, where how much information exchange is taking place. If you're sat in a seminar, that's information exchange. And if you've been in there for half an hour, you've taken in more information, one would argue, therefore your knowledge goes up. And you can build a score off the back of that. But so much of the tech is all about, it's all about even the meeting matching on the app. It's just trying to solve a logistic problem. But what you're saying, I think, and I'm trying to put words in your mouth, and you can agree with these words or not, you're saying the action of me matching with a meeting needs to have value. How many events have you been to where you get bombarded by exhibitors because the value is all in how many meetings can I set up, not how much value can we provide between this rich human interaction. And I think if we start thinking about our events like that, we can actually prove that a physical conversation will shift a dynamic and shift an action way faster than, let's say, 8 digital touch points. Up until we can empirically prove that, events get ditched when budget pressures come in really quickly. Because you can't prove that, can you? We all feel it, but we can't prove it. I went off on a soapbox.
No, it's a really tough one because I think
it's like Hyde Park Corner.
Yeah, no, that was me just pausing and reflecting on what you were saying. I think it's a really tough one, right? Like how you can go a whole digital versus in person, what moves the needle, what moves the dial. I think I genuinely believe that everything has its place rather than focus on which is better or which is why people choose to focus on certain things more than other things. I want to pose the question, is it a maturity thing, like a technology and markets paradigm maturity thing? Because if you think about like websites, there was a time when the website was just to get the information up there. And now we're getting into metadata beyond, went from clicks and opens to time on page, whatnot. So perhaps it's just a maturity thing. The question here is, like, for in-person events, is how long will it take for people to then go, you know what, we've got people in the room, we've delivered the best logistics experience we can for now. To take it to that next level, we need to know a bit more. And because you're right, I think with in-person events, I think there's an advantage beyond the digital event or digital experience, in the sense that if you had, with the amount of information you have about a person in person, if you were able to map that into a digital experience and collect those data points, imagine how much more personalized that experience could be. So you like this, you engage with this topic this way, and then that how that interacts with matching, how that interacts with recommendations on sessions, how that matches with recommendations on where you should visit on the show floor, perhaps where you should eat, where a sponsor or a vendor should, what kind of experience or T&E, so what kind of F&B experience a vendor could offer to that segment of the population. And because it just happens that they seem to like this a lot more. So now I see it as an opportunity, and I'm quite curious to see as to how long it would take to bridge that gap.
Length of time comes with a demand for this type of knowledge, right? And knowledge or information from the buy side. And also, I think also a level of science into the architecture of events. So some of the work that we're doing with some companies, they know they run a sales conference. They know, for example, that by running the sales conference, they get an uptick. So they know it has an impact. But the question they're asking themselves, which I think is a very intelligent question, is what data and evidence do we need? Rather than just shouting out the answers, going, what data and evidence do we need in order to design this event so that uptake will be even bigger than it is? It's an open door. We know there's an uptake. It's an open door. Yeah, I think the smart question is, how can that uptake, how can that 2-day sales event in that case be even more optimized to get a bigger uptake? That's the value. That's the value. And it's not necessarily about having a different color carpet. And it's interesting because I dance around and I love reading loads of different things and seeing where connections are.
Yeah.
This same thing happened in supermarkets. Supermarkets used to be laid out because people thought, this is how it was. And then Tesco invented the loyalty card, and not many people know the reason why they invented the loyalty card is because they wanted to know what people are buying. And the reason why they wanted to know what people are buying is not to give them more stuff, but to figure out how to lay out their store so they can influence the buying. And they do crazy things like test whether smaller tiles make trolleys go slower because of the noise it makes, right? Because you think you're going faster, so you slow down in front of a promotion. It's crazy what they do, but they are optimizing that experience. And
based on the
I
data.
work in this world where I love the in-person experience. I do. I detest the way we're orchestrating it at the moment. That's my problem.
Well, I'm going to eschew the emotional bit of my what I like and dislike. I think that can be a different podcast, what grinds my gears. But what I will say is I think that's very well articulated in terms of the opportunity. I think there's a lot to do. This is a lot to do with creating that digital twin, because when you gave that example there's paradigms within paradigms. There's the event experience on the whole and making the event exhibition experience, optimizing that experience for the visitors. There's the interaction with the vendors and how that translates into signals that the vendor can then map into their buying journey. So like you talked about moving the needle, right? So we know that some opportunities from events move faster than others, but do we actually know the difference between the interactions? Is there some commonality, causality with how those interactions come?
Exactly. Now you're getting at the nugget, right? When I started working on website, we had to go through web logs, right? Too much data almost, like lines and lines. But someone very quickly triaged that down and figured out that actually time on page is the biggest signal. You can measure everything. Of course, you can get all your click data, blah, 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 but that's the nugget. And I think what you've just articulated is, in order to find that nugget, we need lots and lots of data to figure out what the thing is. But the trouble is, with live events, we aren't even getting lots and lots of data. We're still getting the same thing you got 10 years ago. So we haven't got a hope of finding the thing. And the reason why we should be bothered to find the number, whether it's the equivalent of time on page or whatever the number is, right, is because it'll empirically prove the value of this product. We live in an attention economy. Everybody's fighting for our attention. Netflix is fighting sleep, for God's sake, right? That's what the CEO said. And, with the clients I work with have got the ultimate attention product, but we can't articulate its value empirically. It's weird.
Yeah. I can't say it better than you did. I think where I was going to get to with my previous point was I really like that the layout of shops examples and the level to which they take the data thing. Like, I have a family member who also works in retail. She's not giving away gender. Anyway, works for one of these big brands, lots of things. And they were able to get enough information from the retail stores that they partner with. So they don't even own the retail stores, but because of the retail stores collect certain information that they're able to then give this manufacturer information on where best to put their products on the shelf. And it was as you were talking through that, I'm thinking back from an event show floor thing. What do you call it? Footfall heat map. Therefore, everybody congregates here. Everybody wants to congregate around the conference exit or whatever, the main stage exit. Imagine as an event vendor, an event organizer, you're selling to the people. Actually, this is where people with this kind of solution need to be, and how their sessions and how their interaction needs to be. And this is where you need to be, because the way that people go around show flows from the data, blah, blah, blah. Now, so I keep coming back to the digital twin thing. I don't know, I think we're probably coming to the end of this pod, but I would say the next question
I'm trying to give you the last word, right? So give me something else and drop mic. Let's go.
I was going to say that the question for the industry is really start to think about the digital twin of your event. And I don't mean that in terms of the live stream you're doing, or how are you translating that experience into data points a la digital twin. And I would say probably I think that shop floor is probably the best example. Check out Adam's shop floor example and think like shop floor. What are you doing to capture who's coming to the event? What are they engaging with? Or who's at the event? What do they look like? All that stuff. What are they engaging with?
In my book. Chapter 5 in my book, mate.
And then how do they like to meet? And the more questions you ask, the more gaps you find, the clearer the resolution of that digital twin. And then I imagine when you get to that level, that should be easy enough to translate, because it's basically now just like a truly digital experience. And I think that's really the magic between digital and in-person, right? Like it's not so much digital experience in itself, it's more that the ability to use data and analytics then improve an in-person experience. All for it.
Awesome. We'll leave it there, because you're right. We have come to the end of our time. And thank you so much for making the time here. I feel like I've got a full set now in this podcast series. I hope we can drive the narrative forward. And as ever, lovely to talk to you. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Adam. Loved it.